So I'm going to tell you a story like that, and it's the story of Marduk, and it's the Mesopotamian story. And Mesopotamia is one of the earliest civilizations, and it emerged as a consequence of the amalgam of Middle Eastern tribes. So that over a very long period of time. You could think the gods of all of these tribes were warring in an abstract space, in a conceptual space, and that would be the space of argumentation and conflict. And out of that a meta-story emerged. And this is the meta-story, and it's one of a host of similar meta-stories that came out of the Middle East, one of which is the account in Genesis. Okay, so here's the story. So there are two primary deities to begin with, Apsu and Tiamat. Now in order to understand that, well, here's how the Mesopotamians conceptualized the world. There was a, let's call it a disk. That's salt water. Well, why? Well, what happens when you go to the end of the continent? Salt water everywhere, right? So wherever you go, you run into salt water. So that's the disk that surrounds everything. Now, why is it a disk? The world is a dome on a disk. Why? Well, say you're standing in the middle of a field. What does the world look like? A dome on a disk. So it's a phenomenological representation. So the bottom of the dome is the ground on which you stand. What happens if you dig? You hit water, fresh water. So the dome of the land is on a disk of fresh water. What happens if you go to the edge of the land? You run into salt water. The dome of the land is on a disk of fresh water on a disk of salt water. Okay, those are the two gods. Tiamat is god of salt water, and Apsu is god of fresh water. And it's happenstance in some sense, because that's the masculine and the feminine, and they could be attributed all sorts of different geographical areas. Okay, so the two primary gods are Apsu and Tiamat. Tiamat is female and Apsu is male, and they're locked together in an inseparable embrace. Okay, so how do you understand that? Easy. Yin and yang. It's the same idea. Here's another representation. This is a cool one. I've got a couple of them here that are really cool. This is from China. So this is Fuxi and Nuwa. I think I've got that right. But I just love that representation. It's so insanely cool, this representation. So you see the sort of the primary mother and father of humanity emerging from this underlying snake-like entity with its tails tangled together. I think that's I really do believe this, although it's very complicated to explain why. I really believe that's a representation of DNA. So, and that representation, that entwined double helix, that is everywhere. You can see it in Australian Aboriginal art, and I'm using the Australians as an example because they were isolated in Australia for like 50,000 years. They're the most archaic people that were ever discovered, and they have clear representations of these double helix structures in their art. So, and those are the two giant serpents out of which the world is made, roughly speaking. It's the same thing, you see that in the staff of Asclepius, which is the healing symbol that physicians use, although usually that's only one snake, but sometimes it's two. So that's a Chinese representation, and then there's this. That's the Egyptian representation. We talked about the Egyptian story the other day, right? We talked about Isis and Osiris. So there they are, cobras. Their tails are twined together. See, they emerge out of that. That's the dragon of chaos that manifests itself as culture and nature.
Written record of their history, but they did leave us a myriad of awesome myths and legends, including the strange depictions at Nazca. Could the waving man at Nazca, for example, be an actual representation of a deity emerging from a portal or a stargate? This piece of ancient art shows signs that it may be somehow relating to the Sumerian Apsu. The Apsu, which is often spoken of in Sumerian text, and literally means distant water, Ab meaning water, and Zu translates far, distant, or deep. Many experts have deciphered this as place that originates groundwater, fresh water that maintains life with the use of irrigation. In the Sumerian text relating Inanna, Enki's daughter, and Enki, Inanna speaks, I shall direct my steps to Enki, to the Apsu, to Eridu, and I myself shall speak coaxingly to him in the Apsu in Eridu. Directed her steps all by herself towards Enki's Apsu in Eridu. Enki, the king of the Apsu, the Lord Enki, looked up at the Apsu. It becomes apparent that the Apsu is something that is a lot more than a simple source of underground water. We know that from these texts that Enki is the source of the Apsu, and it is located in his city of Eridu. Enki is also recorded in these texts to have to look up to see the Apsu. To have to look up in a land that is extremely flat must mean that Enki is looking up to the top of the highest building in Eridu, which would be the temple ziggurat. This is confirmed by a fragmented text on the heron and turtle, which reads, "Then on the ziggurat, King Enki was on the ziggurat, the great brickwork of the ziggurat, the Apsu, the brickwork of the Apsu." Once in the Apsu, they totally immersed themselves in its water. Without the Apsu, the great gods would simply have grown old like the rest of mankind and eventually died. They had to continually enter the Apsu and immerse themselves in its water in order to extend their lives. This is the state of being that is referred to as entering the Apsu, a state of rejuvenation, an exhilarating moment where water itself can be controlled and where one seems to levitate inside the Apsu.
Is this not what they're talking about? Remember this? Okay, this is Noah. Noah, the earth was covered in water everywhere for 100 years. Okay, this is at the end of the deluge. That plant down there, those are bull kelp. You'll see why that's important in a second. I believe this is what he survived on, and I think he did it in the Apsu. Enki's dwelling, yes.
Not science fiction, German scientists harness the power of photosynthesis for new way to breathe. To explore the possibility, the team injected green algae Reinhardtii, or cyanobacteria, chlamydomonas into tadpoles' hearts. With each heartbeat, the algae inched through blood vessels and eventually reached the brain, turning the translucent tadpole bright green. Shining light on these tadpoles prompted both algae species to pump out oxygen to nearby cells. After distributing algae to the brain, the researchers isolated the tadpole's head and placed it in an oxygen bubble bath with essential nutrients that would preserve the functioning of the cells, allowing the team to monitor neural activity and oxygen levels. As the researchers depleted oxygen from the bath, the nerves ceased firing and fell silent. However, illuminating the tadpole head restarted the neural activity within 15 to 20 minutes, which is about 2 times faster than replenishing the bath with oxygen without the algae. The revived nerves also performed as well or even better than before oxygen depletion, showing that the researchers' method was quick and efficient.
I was right. Tell me I wasn't right. Come on now. Admit it. Don't hate. That's exactly what the hell I was saying. All right. I'm out.
Jump in the booth, bear cap in the road, let me stick to the truth. Lies all round and it starts from the news. One blink of the eye and they're taking off food. One blink of the eye after play, they're taking